YouTube? It's Friday. We're going to have some fun today. I'm going to show you guys how to make mead. A lot of people are always asking me for my mead recipes, and to be quite honest with you, I don't really use them most of the time. I just make mead. Using my hydrometer, I'm able to figure out what I'm looking for as far as alcohol content, and I can go from there really. So I don't really go by a recipe, and after we're done today, you're really not going to have to go by a recipe either. So today we're going to do 2 gallons of plain mead. We're going to do 2 gallons of apple cyser, which is mead made with apple juice instead of water. And we're going to do 1 gallon of a blueberry melomel. And a melomel is basically a mead made with fruit juice instead of water. Okay. Of course, we're going to use some honey here. Some of this honey is from 2014. We're going to use it up, cycle it out of our stash. We obviously keep a little stash of honey going. Basically, we're going to use a packet of yeast or half a packet of yeast for some of these, a little bit of yeast nutrient, and that's really it. So I'm going to teach you guys how to read your hydrometer, how to mix up your must, which is what basically a mead is before you put the yeast into it and it ferments. And we're going to go ahead and get 5 gallons of mead started, so stick with us. This is a hydrometer. Basically, it's a weighted glass measuring device. And on this one, it's got 3 scales of measurement. One is a specific gravity. The other one is a potential alcohol by volume. And the third one is a percent sugar or balling. We're really not going to use that. We're not really interested in the percentage of sugars. What we're really interested in here is potential alcohol by volume, and how we're going to measure that is by taking specific gravity measurements. And what that means is basically a 1.000 is water. There's nothing suspended in the solution, basically. For every pound of honey per gallon of water we add, we're going to raise it by 0.030 on this scale. So basically 3 pounds of honey per a gallon of water is going to give you a 1.090, or right at a 12% alcohol by volume potential, basically a wine level. Okay, so for a mead, you're shooting for anywhere between 1.090 and 1.120, which is 12 to 15% alcohol by volume. So basically, this tool is just going to measure what your alcohol by volume could be in a perfect world. Okay. So how we use a hydrometer actually is we get a container full of our fluid. In this case, this is just water that we're about to turn into mead. And we're going to drop our hydrometer in there. It's going to overflow a little bit. I got a little bit too much water in there. Not a big deal. Okay, make sure that it's in the middle here. We're going to let it float freely. And of course, we're measuring 0. Okay, which is what we want to measure. 1.000. And you want to read this thing at the bottom of the meniscus, not at the top, if you know what that is. Okay, so basically right now we've got a solution, which is water, with nothing suspended in the water. Okay, in order to turn this into wine, mead that we're looking for, I want to make this hydrometer read 1.090. And knowing that 3 pounds of honey would bring that to 1 gallon, we're going to do 6 pounds of honey because we are doing 2 gallons here. So what we're going to do, some of this honey is still a little crystallized maybe. Some stuff on the top. It's just foam really. But we're going to go ahead and pour this in there. Stir it around real good. Looks like we got some wax chunks in there maybe too. Not a big deal. Okay. And put this one in here as well. So that's 3 pounds of honey so far in 2 gallons of water. And I'm going to take this as well. It's good liquid honey there. And while that's draining out, I'm going to go ahead and start stirring this in. You want to get this nice and dissolved. All of the honey totally dissolved into this water. If you see it's got honey dripping off the spoon still, it's not dissolved, so we need to keep stirring until all that's gone. Okay, so like I said, we're going to stir this up until all of the honey is dissolved in the bottom here. And the way we tell that is to run your spoon across the bottom You can tell there's no honey, there's no thickness, it's very thin. It's all dissolved into this water, okay? So basically what we're going to do now is take our hydrometer again, we're going to float it again, and you can see that it floats higher. We want to kind of avoid the bubbles if we can to kind of just get a clear reading, and we're looking for an alcohol percentage around 12%. Basically, this is saying that we are at 1070, so we have a little bit farther to go. Okay, so we've added another pound of honey, so that's 7 pounds of honey in this 2 gallons, and we're going to see what our reading is then. Okay, let it stop bobbing a little bit. We're right there, about 1088. 1090, right in there. So this solution now has the potential to become 12% alcohol by volume if we were to just pitch yeast in there right now, which is about what we're going to do. So let me get this back into the fermentation jugs. I'll get my siphon, my funnel here is in the sanitizer. Okay, I'm gonna gallons of plain mead. This is the must for the mead. We have not added the yeast yet to it, but this is everything that you need, basically honey and water, and that's it. This is set to go for a 12% mead. And next we're going to try to mix up this apple juice with honey and see where we're at there. Alright, so we've got the must for our 2 gallons of plain mead. If you've ever tasted mead, it might not be really your thing. It's basically like a very dry white wine. It doesn't remind you of honey very much at all, in my opinion. So what I like to do is make mead with fruit juices instead of water. I don't really like to cook with water because I think it dilutes the flavor. So I don't really like to make my meads with water because I think it dilutes the flavor. So what you're looking for is some kind of fruit juice that has been maybe pasteurized, but has no preservatives in it. And it's got to be 100% juice. So this here is Lucky Leaf. It's some brand that we picked up at the local store. Basically the ingredients are pasteurized apple juice, and it's got vitamin C added, which is not going to hurt you at all. But there is no preservatives in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to dump this into our container here so that we can measure the specific gravity of the apple juice and see how much honey we'll have to add to this. Okay, so we've got our apple juice in here. We've measured with our hydrometer. We've got about a 7% alcohol by volume potential, which was 1.055 on the hydrometer. Basically, if we would just dump yeast into this apple juice, we'd come up with a hard cider, 6 or 7% alcohol by volume with an apple taste. So we want to kick it up a notch and bring it up to the mead level. So we're actually going to try to bring this up to 1.120, which is a 15% alcohol by volume. We're going to use a yeast that's probably in the 12% alcohol by volume range. So we'll have a little bit of sweetness left when we're done, a little bit of the apple taste, a little bit of the honey taste, and a little bit of sweet. I'm not a real big fan of dry wine, so we're going to try to make this one a little bit sweeter than the dry mead that we made. So we're going to go ahead and dump in 3 pounds of honey in here to give us a start. We're going to mix that all in real good. That should have brought it up 0.045 if you were listening to what I told you about the hydrometer earlier. Each pound of honey per gallon of water will bring the must up 0.030. So now we've got our apple juice here. We've got a little over 4 pounds of honey in it. Let our hydrometer go. We're right there, about where we need to be. Try to get it to slow down a little bit so I can read it better. Get the bubbles away. Yeah, we're right at 15% alcohol by volume. So it's about 11:20. We're going to get this back in the bottles and we're going to cap this up and move on to the blueberries. Okay, so that's basically it as far as making mead. We've got 2 gallons of water here with, I believe, 7 pounds of honey. Our specific gravity reading on this was right around 1090, which is about 12% potential alcohol by volume. Okay, next here we have our 2 apple juice mixtures, the cyser. The initial reading was a 7%, 1055 I believe. We brought it up to 1120, which is a 15% alcohol by volume. The yeast that we're going to be using are all around 12%. So this is going to ferment all the way out, become a dry wine. This one will ferment most of the way out. It should leave a little bit of apple and honey sweetness to it. And finally here we have the blueberry. This one, we also got it up to 1120. It was a little bit lower than this. It was right around 5.5% alcohol by volume. So this needed a lot more sugar than even the apple juice did, the blueberries. So we're basically done here. One thing I will add to this recipe is a yeast nutrient. It's not really a recipe here, but to our way of making mead, I always use a little bit of yeast nutrient. Honey by itself doesn't have all the nutrients that yeast needs to effectively produce the alcohol. So we take 1/8 of a teaspoon per gallon for each one of these jars here. And basically this is diammonium phosphate. It's basically a nitrogen source for the yeast. This way they can effectively consume these sugars and convert them without wasting too much time and energy. And basically, like I said, just 1/8 of a teaspoon in each one of these. We're attracting a little bit of attention from the bees at this point with all this honey we've got out here. Not a big deal. We're just about finished. So we put 1/8 of a teaspoon of yeast nutrient in here. And that's it. Okay. And then for each one of these, we're going to take and we're going to aerate the must. Shake it up real good, get it all nice and bubbly and foamy. You want as much oxygen in there as possible. The yeast really needs a lot of oxygen to be able to do its job. And that's it. So you can see we've attracted quite a bit of attention from the local ladies here. It's not going to hurt them. It's just super sweet stuff. It's not fermented yet. So next thing we're going to do, we've basically got must here. We've got our sugar solutions for each of our flavors and everything at the right alcohol by volume that we're looking for. The only thing that we're missing here is yeast. It's not fermented yet. So for the blueberry, we're going to go with a red yeast. About 12% alcohol by volume. This is a red wine basically, so we're going to go with a red yeast. And basically all we're going to do is sprinkle that packet of yeast in on top of there. We're not even going to let it, we're not even going to mix or nothing. Put an airlock on it, and we're good. Okay, next in line is, these are the apple cysers. We're going to use a Montrachet. Mostly we're going to use Montrachet because that's the yeast that I have in stock here today. You can experiment with anything you want to. Yeast is totally up to you. Everything's going to give you a little bit of different flavor profile. Everything's going to have its own little characteristics. So experiment with what you like. Montrachet makes a nice sweet mead, and that's kind of what we're looking for with this apple. We're looking for sweetness. So we're going to dump about 1/2 packet of yeast in there. We're going to dump the other 1/2 packet of yeast in the other one. Okay. And last but not least here, we have the plain meads that were made with water. These are less sugar concentrated, a little bit of weaker alcohol content. So we're going to use a Cote de Blanc, which is a white wine yeast. These are all by Red Star. Like I said, you can use whatever you like. The sky's the limit. We're going to put 1/2 pack of yeast in there, of white wine yeast. She's taking some of the yeast off my finger. You seen that? And put the other packet in there. Close that up. And that's it. That's it. We have the beginnings of our mead. We're going to put an airlock on each one of these because what's going to happen is these bottles are going to build up pressure now. As that yeast eats the sugars, it's going to convert it to alcohol, and it's going to release CO2. So we don't want the bottles to explode, we want the gases to be able to come out of here. So basically, we use these airlocks. And these airlocks are very cheap, they're about $1 a piece. These wine bottles, you can pick them up $10 or $12, and they come with wine already in them. So you can drink some wine, and then have your little brew equipment. We're going to fill the little airlocks with a little bit of water. Some people use vodka or something like that. It's basically just so no air gets back in to the bottles. So now we're going to leave these for 1 month. They're going to ferment. Most of the fermentation is going to take place in the first 7 to 14 days. After that, we're going to let them sit for a little while. After a month, they'll start to develop a cake of yeast at the bottom. We'll siphon those into new bottles, get rid of the yeast in there, and then we'll begin the aging process after that. So what we're going to do now is take these 5 bottles and put them in a cool, dark place, and we'll come back and see them in about a month. Okay, I just wanted to add a quick note about the thing about recipes, really. You can see we didn't really go by a recipe, we just made mead today. And that's the whole thing, is they never really had recipes back in the day. They just made mead. So as you can see here, we did what we did, and we've made mead. You can experiment with anything you want. I've put cinnamon sticks in a plain mead before. It came out very good. You can put vanilla beans in there. You can use cherry juice. You can use fruit punch. Really, the sky is the limit as far as flavorings and spices and herbs you can put in there. You can put rose hips or wormwood even if you wanted to. You could put some wormwood in there and have a real good time. So the sky's the limit with this, folks. You can really experiment with it and have fun with it. So we'll see you in about a month.